the price of a seat. At the restaurant, my sister announced to everyone, "Get out of here. Go find another table. This one's for family, not adopted girls." They all laughed and agreed. Then the waiter placed a $2,000 bill in front of me for their entire dinner. I smiled, took a sip, and paid the bill. But after that, I heard a voice scream, "Just a moment, please." Before I tell you whose voice stopped the entire room cold, drop a comment below. Where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? I always love seeing how far these stories travel. The voice cut through the noise of the Obsidian Lodge like a gunshot in a library. The laughter at the head table died instantly. My sister Sarah's smirk froze halfway on her face, and my mother, Christina, actually dropped her fork. It clattered against the fine china, a sharp, dissonant ping in the sudden silence. I turned slowly, my hand still resting on the small leather folder that contained the receipt for $2,500. I expected to see a manager, or maybe a confused guest. I did not expect to see my grandmother. Beatrice stood at the edge of our private alcove, leaning on her cane with both hands. She was 80 years old, frail in the way antique porcelain is frail, beautiful, expensive, and terrifyingly sharp. She had not been invited. Sarah had made a point of telling everyone that Grandma was too tired for the altitude in Aspen, that it was better for her health to stay home. But here she was, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my entire car, staring at my father with eyes that looked like frozen lakes. "Did you hear me, John?" she said, her voice low but carrying that undeniable weight of absolute authority. I said, "Just a moment." My father, John, scrambled to stand up, knocking his wine glass over. The dark red liquid bled across the white tablecloth, staining it like a wound. "Mother," he stammered, "we didn't know you were. We thought you were resting." "I'm sure you did," Beatrice said. She didn't look at him. She looked at me. Her gaze swept over my simple dress, the way I was standing apart from the table, and finally, it landed on the receipt under my hand. "Alyssa, bring that here." I hesitated. The air in the room felt thin, brittle. I walked over to her, feeling the eyes of every single person at the table boring into my back. Sarah looked furious, her face flushed a blotchy, ugly red. I handed the receipt to Beatrice. She adjusted her glasses and read it. Then she looked up at the waiter, who was hovering nervously nearby. "This bill has been paid?" she asked him. "Yes, ma'am," the waiter said. "By the young lady." Beatrice nodded slowly. She folded the receipt and put it into her purse. Then she looked at my family, my parents, my sister, the people who had just moments ago laughed as I was told I didn't belong. "You let her pay," Beatrice said. "It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. You let the girl you threw out of the family pay for the champagne you are currently drinking." "It was a joke, Grandma," Sarah piped up, her voice shrill. "Alyssa knows it was a joke," she offered. "Right, Alyssa?" I studied Sarah. My gaze drifted to the diamond ring on her finger, sparkling under the lodge's chandeliers. Then to my mother, who was furiously signaling me to play along, and for the first time in 27 years, I didn't feel the urge to smooth things over. I didn't feel the need to be the peacemaker, the fixer, the good adopted daughter who was just grateful to be included. I looked at my grandmother and smiled. It was a cold smile. "No," I said clearly. "I didn't offer. Sarah told me to leave because I'm not family, but she told me to pay because apparently my money is." The silence that followed was absolute. Beatrice stared at me for a long moment, and then, remarkably, the corner of her mouth twitched upward. "Well," she said, "that clarifies things. Come with me, Alyssa. We have business to discuss. And John, don't bother finishing your drink. I'm canceling the tab." She turned and walked out, her cane tapping a steady, lethal rhythm on the floor. I followed her, leaving my family sitting in the wreckage of their perfect party, the stain of wine spreading slowly across the table. As I followed Beatrice out of the Obsidian Lodge, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening behind me. My mother was probably dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, whispering about how difficult I was. Sarah was likely already spinning a new narrative to her friends, something about how I'd embarrassed the family on purpose. And my father? He was probably staring into his empty glass, wondering who was going to pay for the refill. We walked in silence to Beatrice's private car, a sleek black sedan waiting by the entrance. The driver opened the door, and as I slid onto the leather seat, the cold aspen air was replaced by warmth and the faint scent of expensive perfume. Beatrice settled in beside me, her posture rigid, her gaze fixed straight ahead. "We're going to my chalet," she said. "My attorney is meeting us there." "Attorney?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the quiet car. "Yes. We have a lot to undo, Alyssa. Starting with your finances." I leaned back, closing my eyes. My phone buzzed in my clutch once, twice, then a steady stream of vibrations. I didn't check it. Instead, I pulled it out, opened my banking app, and stared at the screen. The balance was lower than it should have been. It always was. For 5 years, I had been sending $2,000 a month to my parents' joint account. It was labeled rent and support, a remnant of a guilt trip my mother had laid on me when I first got my job. "We sacrificed so much to raise you," she'd said. "It's only fair you contribute now that you're successful." Successful. I was a landscape architect, yes, but I lived in a studio apartment the size of a closet so I could afford to send them money. I drove a 10-year-old car so Sarah could lease a new SUV every 2 years. I clipped coupons so my father could gamble on weekends. I tapped the transfer tab. The recurring payment was scheduled for the first of the month 3 days from now. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a pang of guilt or a flicker of doubt. I just pressed cancel. "Confirm cancellation?" "Yes," I whispered. Next, I opened the family plan settings for our cell phones. 4 lines. Mine, my parents', and Sarah's. I paid the bill in full every month because my father said it was easier that way. I selected the 3 lines that weren't mine. "Remove from plan? Goodbye," I murmured, and tapped the screen. I sat there for a moment, waiting for the old voice in my head to tell me I was being selfish, that I was ungrateful, that I owed them everything because they had saved me from the foster system. But the panic didn't come. Instead, I felt. I looked out the window at the passing snow-covered trees. For years, I had thought I was paying them back for their love. I thought if I just gave enough, if I was useful enough, I would finally earn my place at their table. I thought the money was a bridge I was building to reach them. But tonight, when Sarah told me to leave and the waiter handed me that bill, I finally understood. It wasn't a bridge. It was rent. I wasn't their daughter. I was their tenant. And I had been overpaying for a room in a house where I wasn't even allowed to sit on the furniture. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy a family. I had internalized the idea that my presence was a burden, a cost that needed to be offset. Learned helplessness, a therapist had once called it. The belief that you have no control over your situation, so you stop trying to change it. You just endure. You just pay. But tonight, the currency had changed. I looked over at Beatrice. She was watching me, her expression unreadable. "Did you do it?" she asked softly. "I canceled everything," I said. "The transfers, the phone plan, all of it." "Good," she said. "That was the easy part. Now comes the truth." The chalet was a masterpiece of modern luxury, all glass and stone perched on a cliff overlooking the town. Inside, a fire was already roaring in a fireplace large enough to stand in. Beatrice led me to a seating area where a man in a sharp suit was waiting. He stood as we approached, his expression serious. "This is Mr. Vance," Beatrice said. "He's been managing my personal finances for 40 years, and for the last 6 months, he's been looking into yours." Mr. Vance nodded. "Miss Alyssa, please, sit down." I sat, the leather sofa swallowing me whole. "Why were you looking into my finances?" "Because I asked him to," Beatrice said, taking the seat opposite me. "I've suspected for a long time that John and Christina were living beyond their means, but I didn't realize until recently that they were doing it at your expense." Mr. Vance opened a sleek laptop. We've compiled a forensic accounting of your contributions to the household over the last 5 years. It's substantial. He turned the screen toward me. I stared at the spreadsheet, rows upon rows of numbers. My monthly transfers, the phone bills, the emergency loans that were never repaid. But then, there were other things, expenses I hadn't even thought to count. Here, Mr. Vance pointed to a cluster of transactions from 3 years ago. You paid $25,000 to a company called Greenscapes LLC. That was Sarah's landscaping startup, I said, my voice hollow. She said she couldn't get a loan because she had no credit history. She promised to pay me back once she got her first big contract. Greenscapes LLC was dissolved 6 months later, Mr. Vance said. The assets were liquidated. Did you see any of that money? No, I whispered. She said the business failed. She said there was nothing left. There was $12,000 left, Mr. Vance corrected. It was transferred directly to a travel agency for a research trip to Cabo San Lucas. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I remembered that trip. Sarah had come back tan and glowing, complaining about how hard she'd worked networking. And here, Beatrice pointed to another line. $15,000 to Dr. Eris. Plastic surgery. Mom's deviated septum, I said automatically. She had breathing problems. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. Christina has had 3 nose jobs, Alyssa. None of them were for breathing. You paid for her vanity while you were wearing a coat with a broken zipper. I looked down at my coat, draped over the arm of the sofa. It was true. The zipper had been stuck for 2 winters. I'd safety pinned it shut because I couldn't justify the cost of a new one. I didn't know, I said, my voice trembling. I thought I was helping. You were the silent investor, Beatrice said, her voice hard. You funded their lifestyle. You paid for Sarah's mistakes. You subsidized your father's gambling. And in return, they gave you a studio apartment and a seat at the kids' table. Not anymore, I said. The anger was rising now, a slow, hot tide. I canceled everything. That's a start, Beatrice said. But stopping the bleeding isn't enough. We need to close the wound. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. Mr. Vance has found something else. Something much bigger than monthly transfers and bad loans. What? I asked. Beatrice didn't answer immediately. She looked at Mr. Vance, who nodded grimly. Your biological parents, Beatrice said softly. They didn't just leave you with a few boxes of clothes, Alyssa. They left you a legacy. The warmth of the chalet felt 1,000,000 miles away from the frozen reality outside, but my phone was still connected to the cold world I'd just left. It buzzed violently against the side table, vibrating with an angry persistence. It's Sarah, I said, glancing at the screen. Answer it, Beatrice commanded. Put it on speaker. Let's hear what she has to say. I accepted the call. Sarah's voice exploded into the quiet room, shrill and distorted by rage. Are you insane? You seriously canceled the phone plan. My data just cut out in the middle of uploading my engagement photos. Do you know how embarrassing that is? Hello, Sarah, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking in my veins. Don't, hello, Sarah, me. You ruined my night. First you make a scene with the bill, then you storm out with Grandma like some drama queen. And now this? Turn it back on, Alyssa. Right now. And transfer the rent money while you're at it. Dad is freaking out. Dad is freaking out because he knows the free ride is over, I said. And so should you. Free ride? I'm your sister. You're supposed to help me. You're just jealous because I'm getting married and you're alone in that tiny apartment. You're pathetic. I'm not the one wearing a ring paid for with stolen money, I said, glancing at Mr. Vance. He gave a sharp nod. What are you talking about? Trevor bought this ring. Ask Mom and Dad where the money really came from, Sarah. Ask them about the trust fund. There was a pause, a moment of confusion on the other end. Then my mother's voice cut in, breathless and panicked. She must have been listening. Alyssa, stop this. You're upset. We can talk about this when you calm down. We're done, I said. I'm with Grandma now, and we know everything. I hung up. The silence that followed was heavy, Final. Mr. Vance cleared his throat. They'll be here soon. They know where your grandmother stays. Let them come, Beatrice said, her eyes flashing. I've been waiting for this conversation for 20 years. She turned to me. Alyssa, what Mr. Vance is about to show you will change everything, but I need you to be strong. Can you do that? I've been strong my whole life, I said. I'm ready. Beatrice nodded to Mr. Vance. He pulled a thick file from his briefcase. The label on the front read simply, The Estate of Michael and Elizabeth Ward, my biological parents. Names I had only seen on a birth certificate. Your parents were not poor, Alyssa, Mr. Vance began. They were brilliant architects. They died in a plane crash when you were 2. But before they did, they established a trust for you. A trust that was meant to be accessed when you turned 25. He slid a document across the table. It was a bank statement from a trust account. The balance at the top was dated 5 years ago. $1,500,000. I stared at the number, the commas and zeros blurring together. $1.5 million. John and Christina were named as the trustees. Mr. Vance continued. They were supposed to manage it for your benefit. Instead, they drained it. He flipped the page. A list of withdrawals, dating back to when I was 10. They used it to buy their house. They used it to fund John's failed business ventures. They used it for vacations, cars, jewelry, and this. He pointed to a transaction from 2 months ago. A wire transfer for $45,000 to Diamond District Jewelers. Sarah's ring, I whispered. Yes, Beatrice said, her voice like ice. Your sister is wearing your inheritance on her finger, and she had the audacity to tell you to find another table. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just used me. They had consumed me. They had taken the legacy my parents left for me and used it to build a shrine to themselves, forcing me to pay admission to visit it. What do we do? I asked, looking up at Beatrice. We don't just get the money back, she said. We take back your life. Mr. Vance has prepared the filings. Fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. We're freezing their assets tomorrow morning. But first, she added, looking toward the heavy wooden door of the chalet as a car engine roared outside. We deal with the guests. Someone was pounding on the door, shouting. It was my father. Open up! Mother! Alyssa! I know you're in there. Beatrice stood up, gripping her cane. She didn't look frail anymore. She looked like a general walking onto a battlefield. Stay here, Alyssa, she commanded. It's time I reminded my son who actually owns the mountain he's standing on. When Beatrice opened the door, the cold wind rushed in, carrying with it the frantic energy of my family. John and Christina stumbled in first, their faces flushed from the cold and the wine. Sarah followed. Her mascara smudged, looking less like a bride-to-be and more like a child who had been told no for the first time. Mother, what is the meaning of this? John blustered, trying to regain some semblance of authority. Taking Alyssa away like that? Embarrassing us in front of our guests? Sit down, John, Beatrice said. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She pointed to the sofa opposite mine with her cane. My parents hesitated, then sat. Sarah remained standing, her arms crossed, glaring at me. This is ridiculous, she spat. Alyssa, stop hiding behind Grandma and fix this. Turn the phones back on and transfer the money. Now. Sit down, Sarah, Beatrice said, her voice like a whip crack. Sarah flinched and sank into an armchair. You wanted to know the meaning of this, Beatrice said, pacing slowly in front of them. The meaning is that I am finished watching you parasites feed off this girl. Parasites? Christina gasped, clutching her pearls. Mother, how can you say that? We've done everything for Alyssa. We took her in when she had nothing. You took her in. Mr. Vance interrupted, his voice calm and precise, because you were the trustees of a $1.5 million estate. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. My father's face went from red to a sickly pale gray. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Sarah looked confused, glancing between them. What estate? Sarah asked. What is he talking about? Tell her, John, Beatrice said. Tell your daughter how you funded her lifestyle. John stared at the floor, his jaw working. He couldn't speak. Fine, Beatrice said. I'll tell her. Alyssa's biological parents left her a trust fund. It was meant to secure her future. Instead, your parents stole every cent of it. That's a lie, Christina cried, though her eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit. We invested it. The market crashed. We lost it. We have the records, Mrs. Ward, Mr. Vance said, holding up the file. We have every withdrawal, the down payment on this house, the renovations, the cars, the vacations, and most recently, he pulled out a specific document and held it up. It was a receipt, a wire transfer for $45,000 to Diamond District Jewelers. Sarah froze. She looked down at her left hand, at the ring she had been flaunting all night. Trevor bought this, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Trevor put $5,000 down, Mr. Vance corrected. Your parents wired the rest, from Alyssa's trust account. 2 days before the account was closed due to insufficient funds. I watched Sarah as the realization hit her. She looked at the ring, then at me. For a second, I thought she might apologize. I thought she might feel the weight of the theft, the horror of wearing my stolen future on her finger, but then her face hardened. She covered the ring with her other hand, protecting it. So what? She snapped. It's spent. What do you want me to do? Give it back. I'm getting married, Alyssa. You're going to ruin my wedding over money? I stared at her. At the sister I had tried so hard to please, at the girl I had funded, supported, and loved, despite everything. It's not your money, Sarah, I said quietly. It never was. And that ring? It's not a symbol of love. It's evidence. Evidence? John sputtered. Now listen here, Alyssa. We raised you. We fed you. That money was reimbursement for the expenses of bringing you up. Reimbursement? Beatrice stepped forward, her cane hitting the floor with a thud. You stole from an orphan you swore to protect. You committed fraud. You breached your fiduciary duty. And you did it while treating her like a servant in her own home. She turned to Mr. Vance. File the charges, she said. Mother, no! Christina shrieked, lunging forward to grab Beatrice's arm. You can't! We're your family! Beatrice pulled her arm away with a look of pure disgust. Family? She repeated. You don't know the meaning of the word. You are thieves. And as of tomorrow morning, you will be destitute thieves. She looked at me then, her eyes softening for the first time. It's over, Alyssa, she said. The blood money stops here. By morning, the world had changed. I woke up in the guest room of the chalet, the sun blindingly bright against the snow outside. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered. The lodge, the bill, the ring, the theft. I walked into the living room. Beatrice was already there, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. Mr. Vance was on the phone, speaking in low, clipped tones. It's done, Beatrice said without looking up. The assets are frozen. The accounts are locked. The fraud charges have been filed with the district attorney. What happens now? I asked. Now, she said, folding the paper. We watch them crumble. It didn't take long. By noon, my phone was blowing up with messages from mutual friends. Sarah had been posting frantic updates about banking errors and misunderstandings. Then, silence. Mr. Vance informed us that John and Christina had tried to access their accounts to pay the lodge bill and were declined. They had been escorted off the premises. Sarah's fiancé, Trevor, had apparently learned about the stolen money for the ring and had called off the engagement, citing irreconcilable ethical differences. 2 days later, I was back at my apartment in the city, packing a bag. I wasn't moving out, but I needed to be somewhere else, while the legal storm raged. There was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. It was them. My parents stood in the hallway. but they didn't look like the people who had sipped champagne in Aspen. My father was unshaven, wearing a wrinkled tracksuit. My mother's hair was unkempt, her eyes red and swollen. They looked small, defeated, hollow. I opened the door, but I didn't step back to let them in. "Alyssa," my mother sobbed, reaching for me. "Oh, thank God. Please, you have to talk to Grandma. She won't listen to us. She's ruining us." "She's not ruining you," I said calmly. "She's holding you accountable." "We're your parents," John shouted, though his voice cracked. "We raised you. We gave you a home." "Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means you had a fiduciary duty," I said, "and you failed." "We did it for the family," Christina pleaded. "We wanted you all to have a good life. We just got in over our heads." "No," I said. "You wanted to look like you had a good life. There's a difference." I surveyed them, stripping away the years of intimidation. I had always thought they were powerful, impenetrable. But now, without the money, the having, there was no being underneath. They were just appetites wrapped in designer clothes, empty vessels that had been filled with my inheritance. "Please, Alyssa," my father begged, his bluster gone. "We have nowhere to go. The house is in your grandmother's name. She's evicting us. Sarah has nowhere to go. We're going to be on the street." I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope Mr. Vance had given me. "This is the legal notice," I said, handing it to my father. "It outlines the terms of the lawsuit and the eviction timeline. You have 30 days. "Alyssa, please," my mother wailed. "Have mercy." "I am having mercy," I said. "I'm not pressing for jail time." Yet, I started to close the door. "Alyssa," my father cried, jamming his foot in the gap. "You owe us. We took you in, and I paid you back." I said, my voice cold and final. $1.5 million plus interest. The lease is up. Get out. I kicked his foot away and slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Then I leaned against the wood and listened to them pounding on the other side, their shouts muffled and distant. Guilt didn't come. Sadness didn't follow. I felt like a tenant who had finally bought the building. 6 months later, I sat in the middle of a garden I had designed. It was a small pocket park in the city, tucked between 2 office buildings, a hidden sanctuary of green in a world of concrete. I was sketching on my tablet, the lines of a new project taking shape, when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. Wire transfer received, $125,000. The first installment of the restitution. Beatrice's lawyers had been relentless. They had liquidated everything: the house, the cars, the jewelry. Even Sarah's engagement ring had been seized and sold at auction. Every penny was being returned to the trust, plus interest. I looked at the number, feeling a strange sense of detachment. The money was mine. Legally and morally. It would help fund my new landscape architecture firm. It would buy me a real house. One with a guest room and a view. But it didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the years of neglect. It didn't give me back the childhood I'd lost or the family I'd never really had. And that was okay. I had spent so long waiting for them to love me, to validate me, to give me permission to exist. I thought if I paid enough, if I was good enough, they would finally see me. But they never saw me. They only saw what I could provide. Beatrice had seen me, though. She had seen the truth, and she had given me the tools to fight back. But even she couldn't build my life for me. That was my job. I put down my tablet and looked around the garden. The Japanese maples I'd planted were turning a brilliant, fiery red. The water feature I'd designed bubbled softly, masking the noise of the traffic outside. It was peaceful. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I wasn't the tenant paying rent for a seat at a table where I wasn't wanted. I was the architect. I was building my own table. To anyone who feels like they are on the outside looking in, wondering why they aren't enough, wondering what they have to pay to belong, you don't have to pay anything. Your worth is not a subscription fee. Your presence is not a debt. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop buying your way into a life that was never designed for you. Sometimes, You have to walk out of the lodge, into the cold, and realize that the warmth you were seeking was inside you all along. If you've ever had to buy your own seat at the table, I want you to know, you can build your own table. If this story spoke to you, share it. Let's remind everyone that family is about behavior, not blood.